Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Diversity and opportunity.
Lewis?
Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
Make America great again. Yeah.
I love this place called America.
I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, we're talking about American exceptionalism. What is it? Has it peaked? And does it really matter if America isn't great? The US has long been the world's most dominant player, with its resilient economy, leadership in technology, military might, strong dollar, which also acts as the globe's reserve currency, and morally upright stance on world affairs. 11 years ago, this fictional speech from an Aaron Sorkin show called The Newsroom caused a real-life stir.
There is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending, where we spend more than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies.
Now we got a new president that says I can no longer remain a resident.
Since then, we've seen political attacks on trusted US institutions, the president introducing harmful trade tariffs, federal debt soar, and barriers at the borders. And there have been suggestions that US exceptionalism is starting to fade.
Being exceptional is hard work. The apparatus that has kept America convening and influencing over recent decades, it's very, very complicated. And of course, with that complexity comes a kind of fragility.
At some point of time, money is going to pour out of the USA. And I mean pour. The faith in that economy is going to disappear.
It's very hard to find another example of an advanced economy where life expectancy declines, where mortality amongst young males rises.
Our next story is about America, specifically America's debt. It stands at $36 trillion. That's the debt, $36 trillion. That's what the US government owes. $36 trillion. It's a ticking time bomb. And according to the IMF, it is ticking louder than ever.
The Chinese and others are saying you're not an example either politically or economically that anyone else in the world ought to follow. And you're in no position to lecture the rest of the world in those arenas because of all the problems that you have.
If you have investments, and this includes KiwiSaver, you're globally connected. You probably have more money in the US than you think.
The average New Zealand household probably has about $65,000 in KiwiSaver between a couple. And of that $65,000, about $28,000 would be in US shares and US bonds. Don't forget that the US makes up a lot of the bond market as well. So that's the quantum of how much the average New Zealand household has invested in assets that are in the United States. And it's probably about the same amount again when you consider the New Zealand Super Fund and ACC and other government financial agencies.
That's Mark Brighouse, who is the Chief Investment Strategist at Fisher Funds. He's written a market commentary piece asking if US exceptionalism has peaked. He's going to tell us all about it. But first, a very short history lesson. Where did the phrase American exceptionalism come from?
The gist of it is that America has a unique place in the world and is an exemplar of free market economy and an example to the rest of the world. We have seen 2 different threads in American history of how that is put into practice. John Quincy Adams and others thought that we should be the city on the hill, the model for the rest of the world, and that we should try and set an example that others would emulate. The other side of that debate, if you will, was Woodrow Wilson, who believed that we ought to be aggressively out in the world trying to, as he put it, make the world safe for democracy.
It is because we are the indispensable nation. We stand taller, we see further.
American exceptionalism as a term has been around since the 40s, at least, and the idea of a kind of American exceptionalism has been around since before the founding of the country even. But Albright's American exceptionalism was a very specific one, built upon global supremacy in the post-Cold War era.
American exceptionalism is a term that's been used for quite a while to describe the aspects about the United States that are unique, but unique in a way that's favourable. The good things about the United States, that the things that it possesses that nobody else has.
What are they?
Well, they're widely thought to be the fact that it's the strongest military power on the planet, that it is an easy place to do business, it has powerful technology and deep capital markets, and has had astounding economic growth and returns to investors over many, many years.
And so this is why the American dollar is like the world's safe house.
Yeah, the American dollar is a sort of a de facto reserve currency. It has that status because it's what people choose to invoice their trade in and what countries choose to hold as reserves. So it has this de facto reserve currency status that gives a lot of benefits to the United States.
So when we, just sitting on our little ignorant high horses, look at America and think, it's all going to hell in a handbasket, we shouldn't be laughing.
I know, because it has a big influence, and it's had a big influence on the performance of KiwiSaver accounts over the last few decades. The US stock market has outperformed other stock markets around the world over the last few decades, and actually over the last 35 years. And to put it into context, it's about 4% per annum on average over the last 35 years, but a lot of that has come through in the last 15 years when it's outperformed the rest of the world by about 7% per annum. So that adds up to quite a lot.
Why does it do that? Why is it so much better, more powerful, stronger?
It's been a combination of things. And some of those things might be repeatable, and some of them might have been one-offs. The US dollar has been strong, but it's been a bit weaker over the last year or so. So repeated strength of the US dollar might not be a driver in future. It's been due to what we call valuation multiples expanding. So that means that price to earnings ratios have gone up. So for a given dollar of earnings, the market is paying more for that earnings. And that's hard to repeat that once multiples have already expanded. And what's left is the underlying growth in the economy, and that's been strong, and that's fed through to earnings and dividends. But that's probably only the third driver. And even if that is sustained, that probably still means that you have weaker returns going forward than they were in the past. Not as strong as they were in the past from the United States.
And the US is unusual, isn't it? You were telling me before that basically 7 companies run the place.
Yeah, there's this phrase called
the Magnificent Seven.
Not only is the world's stock market very concentrated in the United States, but it's within the United States it's very concentrated in 7 companies. And they are names that Kiwis would know most of them. They're Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, which is the owner of Google, and then it's Meta, the owner of Facebook, and then the sixth one, NVIDIA, is not so well known, but they make all the computer chips that go into data centers and AI computing. And then the 7th one is more of a household name, that's Tesla, which is increasingly being left out of the magnificent category.
Tesla investors feel like they're on a roller coaster with rarely a dull day. The feud between Elon Musk and President Trump saw the stock fall 14%, the 10th worst trading day.
And now people are referring to the Magnificent Six companies because there's a slow realization that Tesla may be just another car company.
And is that because of Elon Musk's carryings on, or is that because, the Chinese make electric cars too?
Probably because of a realisation that other people make pretty funky electric cars too, and in New Zealand you see a lot of electric car brands on the road. But that's a question mark that hangs over the other 6 magnificent companies, the degree to which any of them has a unique position or whether they provide services that you can get elsewhere. And people can make up their own minds about that, but it's increasingly likely that you can get different streaming services, you get different devices, different AI providers, just as you can get different electric vehicle makers.
Okay. Now, when I was doing some research for this term, American exceptionalism, most of the headlines on news stories were US unexceptionalism. So what is happening now to this concept? What is changing in the States to weaken that kind of strongman in the world view?
Yeah, I think when you talk to Americans about their economic performance, they talk a lot about how easy it is to do business in the United States, but that isn't really supported by the surveys. There is a survey called doingbusiness.org, and it shows that The things that are tougher to do in America, if you're a business person, is dealing with construction permits, registering a property, paying taxes. Funnily enough, the things that are easy to do and still show up at America's the easiest place to do is getting credit and going broke, resolving insolvency. They are quick to wind companies up and move on. The other thing they point to is that they're a democracy. And, it's true that many people in the world live under authoritarian regimes, and that's sad. But when you do see surveys about various aspects of US democratic process, the Economic Intelligence Unit ranks a lot of countries on how well their democratic mechanisms are functioning. And the top of the list are 25 countries that they describe as full democracies, and then there are a category called flawed democracies, and then it goes down from there. Norway is the first. New Zealand is the second. The US, the land of the free, ranks 28th, so it's outside the category of full democracies.
Well, so it's sort of in the flawed...
Yeah, it's in the top of the flawed democracies, and that's measured by things like the functioning of government, participation in the political process, the political culture, civil liberties, electoral process and pluralism.
But why is that stuff important financially? Because you look at somewhere like China, where the government can dictate so much and subsidise industries and that kind of thing. Why is democracy important when you're talking about financial might?
Well, because investors want to see strong institutions. They want to know that there's institutions, even though they might be part of the government, but that you can rely on them not to have political interference. Good examples would be like the military, the Supreme Court, the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Reserve, the medical system, the police, the press, and universities, and even the statistical agencies.
Economists, businesses, consumers, and investors react to an alarming series of developments tied to the U.S. economy and the president's shocking reaction to a sluggish jobs report. The revised figures show the worst hiring slump since the pandemic. President Trump reacted to the numbers by firing the head of the agency that produces the jobs report, baselessly accusing the agency of manipulating jobs numbers for political purposes. The president's sudden firing could raise major questions about potential political interference around vital government economic data. And it all comes as the president also lashed out once again at Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, demanding he lower interest rates.
And when you see politicians meddling or even implying that they could interfere in the functioning of those sort of agencies.
Firing the head of the statistical agency when the news weren't.
And it's troubling when you see, even in New Zealand, you see politicians implying that they could influence the central bank. Those sort of things are not helpful for maintaining trust and confidence and keeping the cost of doing business down.
Because that reel of things you've just gone through, I could think of something Trump and his cohorts done for just about everyone. I mean, using the military to go into states where it's really not warranted for.
And just recently spreading misinformation about vaccines. So you're getting political meddling in things which really should be the public and the investing public should be able to rely on.
Okay, so these things are worrying, but are they as bad as has been compared by some economists, comparing them to the fall of the Soviet Union or the fall of the Roman Empire?
And the idea is that some of the pathologies of the late Soviet Union are visible in the United States today.
Is America going down the toilet?
I think what we're talking about here is investment returns that in future will be lower than they have in the past, but that's not a financial apocalypse. This is not the sort of situation where you have your shotgun by the door and your baked beans in the cupboard and your Bible by the bed. But maybe that's good advice in any investment environment.
So people like Niall Ferguson, who has drawn parallels between things that are happening in America now and things that were happening in the Soviet Union in the 70s, things like, the elites being disconnected from people. He's saying, America is on the same downward spiral. He's been rubbished by other economists, but where do you sit on that?
Well, it is troubling that you're seeing such a rise in diseases of despair.
For more than a decade, researchers have noticed a rise in what's come to be called deaths of despair. That includes deaths from suicides, overdoses, and substance use disorders.
In the past 2.5 years, we've had about a 300% increase in the drug-related overdose ambulance runs. and the prevalence of opiate addiction in this area continues to increase.
Despite decades of advancements in health care, diet, and safety, middle-aged white Americans are now living shorter, not longer lives.
For a country with, that spends a lot on healthcare and well-being, you are seeing diseases of despair, which people categorise as suicides, alcoholism, drug overdose, violent deaths. That sort of thing is high in America. So for a country that has a strong rule of law and spends a lot on healthcare, the American people are likely to die from things that they shouldn't really. So there's definitely social indicators that don't support the ongoing American exceptionalism. But we contrast that with a business environment that still is an attractive place for people like us to look for investment opportunities.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Well, people like me travel to the US on business, and we are amazed at the contrasts. We hear all about the incredible...
From previously to now, are you talking
No,
about?
between different aspects of the United States. So you imagine that you're sitting in a high-rise looking down at Central Park, and you're hearing all about these incredible investment opportunities, businesses that are doing exciting new things and have massive pools of capital to support them. But then you leave that meeting, you catch the subway, and you realise that the homeless crisis has been dumped in the lap of the transport agencies. And then you go to the airport and there's a 2-hour delay because the systems that air traffic controllers use are dated from the 1990s.
Yeah, well, people are actively avoiding Newark.
Yeah. And then when you do get on the plane, you're reminded that 40% of US adults are obese. And life expectancy in the US is going the wrong ways. But you have to be careful not to conflate those social and political issues with the business outlook and conclude that you don't want to invest there.
Why not? Because those things would apply in other countries, wouldn't they? We tend to not invest in places that have authoritarian regimes, that they're ethically dodgy. Is America getting to the stage where we think they are ethically dodgy, that they, the lowest, the poorest people in America are not doing well at all, that they've just passed this amazing bill that gives tax relief to the rich? At what stage do we look at their society and think we don't like what's happening there, we'll go elsewhere?
Well, I think you need to remember when you're investing that you're not voting. You're weighing things up, and it's not that clear-cut. Many of the world's most profitable companies are still listed in the US. They have operations all around the world. It might only be that a small amount of their customer base is in the United States. They would sell to customers in nearly every country, and those customers might be numbered in the billions. So you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But one thing the US is exceptional about, as an exception, is they have more income and wealth inequality than many other wealthy countries. Normally, as countries get wealthier, the inequality in society comes down. The US is an outlier in terms of having that massive gap. But when you are looking for places to do business, you're still seeing lots of opportunities and lots of demand from American consumers.
Does Fisher Funds still feel confident about investing in America? Are you looking at changing the balance of where you put your money?
There's a lot of factors that come into where we invest our clients' money, and the country that it's in is just one. There's lots of other factors because we would analyse the companies and the securities that we invest in carefully. There'll be some that we would leave alone because they have unattractive investment characteristics, but there's some that we wouldn't shy away from just because they're in a country where we might not agree with all the social policies or all the politics.
Have we got to a stage yet where investors are withdrawing from the US dollar and, say, heading to the euro or the pound or the yen?
Well, US investors themselves have a long way to go to spread their money into other countries. It's hard to put an exact number on it, but it seems like the typical American has more than 80% of their wealth in the United States. They don't invest overseas very much. So there's a lot to do for them to diversify their portfolios to other parts of the world. And we might be starting to see that. They are much more interested in what's happening to European companies, which have been perhaps hobbled by the austerity policies in Europe for many years. They are more interested in companies in Japan, where Japan has only recently escaped deflation, and its economy has possibly turned the corner, and they're more interested in opportunities in emerging markets, which have struggled for a decade or so. All the glory has gone to the United States, and emerging markets have been going sideways. The US dollar is starting to lose its gloss. One of the features of the environment earlier this year was that after Liberation Day, US shares and US bonds and the US dollar all weakened together, which is what troubled investors so
this
much.
Is the tariffs we're talking about
and after
now.
the tariffs came in, for a period there, it was people shied away from the US across the board.
America's debt, federal debt now, is like $37.4 trillion.
Republicans recently passed a big bad bill, and now the numbers are out. It added over $3.5 trillion to our federal deficit.
Surely there's got to be something done about that before it implodes. Can they keep carrying on like that?
Well, the answer to that is yes, they can keep carrying on, and yes, it could become a problem. I think there's a line from a Ernest Hemingway novel where the question is, how did you go bankrupt? And the response is gradually at first and then suddenly. And so financial problems can just fester along for years, if not decades. So yes, the US has nearly $38 trillion in debt. It's about a $30 trillion economy, and that situation is getting worse at a rate of about $2 trillion a year.
This is the gap.
This is the gap between what they spend and what they collect, and it's very hard to turn that around because a lot of that spending is entitlements that'll be hard to wind back. And
you're talking pensions and
pensions and stuff. Sort of like veterans entitlements and things. So the only way to wind it back is to increase taxes, which would be very unpopular. The situation will get worse, but only gradually, and it will eventually become more and more difficult for the rest of the world to fund the US deficit. So that's a problem that's on the minds of investors, but it could go be a long time, and it's been a problem that's been developing for a long time.
So, will there be a tipping point when America's no longer a safe harbour if nothing's been done to address these issues?
No, I don't think there will be a tipping point. The scenario you're looking at is a period of where returns aren't as strong as they were in the past, and that's not a calamity. People have to be realistic about future returns. KiwiSaver started at a wonderful time. It started in the depths of a global financial crisis, so the returns since day one have been great for New Zealanders. They just need to be realistic about what the returns will be going forward, and I don't think that moving all your money out of the US is the answer to that, because the investment decisions are far more nuanced than that.
And if you're looking at your KiwiSaver balance and you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I hope my provider is edging out of America, is there anything people can do personally about that, or do you have to put your hands in the knowledge of your...
It's simple. You should look at your quarterly update from your KiwiSaver provider. They'll probably send that to you. You can go to their website, and you might see that there's some US companies listed on the top 10 holdings. The simple thing to do is ring up your provider and ask about their investment rationale for the selection of those companies. And if you're happy with the investment case they give you, then you stop worrying. If they can't give you a strong investment case for why that particular US company is in the top 10 holdings, well, maybe then you think about the provider. But there'll probably be a good investment case that will contain aspects that you probably didn't realise, and you could probably stop worrying.
That's it for today. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Gwen McClure. Thanks to Mark Brighouse from Fisher Funds. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. I'm Alexia Russell. Ka kite anō.